Hello YouTube. Well, this has been an interesting week. That's because for the past 7 days, well, actually today is the 7th day specifically, I've been logging everything that I've been eating, as well as taking measurements of my vitals, all except for my weight since I need a new battery for my scale. I started doing this because I was recently in the hospital, as a previous video mentioned, and now I have to adjust to the medications that I've been taking post-op. But I also decided it would be a good time to get some objective measurements and see how carbs affect me personally, as well as noting how the very low carb diet that I'm using, basically just a step above carnivore diet, is going. So first, let's look at my blood sugars, which I have on this chart here. My numbers are running a tad bit high at the moment, and that's something my doctor warned me about because she said that both the pain medication I have, as well as the 2 antibiotics I'm taking, all work to elevate my blood sugars. But the important factor is that I need to keep my blood sugars below 140 for healing, and by and large I've been able to do that for the most part. Of course, I should mention the scale here. I've been taking my sugars roughly around 8:15 in the morning, then around noon, and again at around 6 p.m. So every 3 measurements counts for a full day, with a couple of exceptions. The first is that the last 2 measurements are for today, and I haven't yet done my final measurement of the day. The second one, well, see this spike where my blood sugars went back up to nearly 180? I actually only took 2 measurements the day before that, and that's because the day of that spike I was very, very sick and ended up going to bed early. And if you wonder why, well, you might be able to tell that from this chart. This is the grams of fat, carbs, and proteins I was eating on a per day basis. You'll notice for the most part, the carbs stay relatively low, except for day 4 here. Day 4 is actually November 20th, in case you're wondering. It was last Friday. And for that day, as part of a celebration moving into Thanksgiving week, I ended up eating some food that contained a lot of carbs. I actually didn't think it would be as bad as it ended up being. Firstly, because in the hospital, I was told I could eat up to 225 grams of carbs per day. But, well, you saw the spike in my blood sugars. That wasn't the worst of it though. Probably due to a combination of having not eaten that many carbs for several months now, as well as having antibiotics kill off a lot of my stomach bacteria, it totally wrecked my body. I felt nauseous and went to bed early, only to wake up in the middle of the night with severe diarrhea, which ended up in the morning with me vomiting what felt like pure stomach acid. It really burned the back of my throat and I felt miserable. I slept in the next day, so that first measurement was actually done about 11 a.m. and my blood sugars were up to 176. But by that evening, they had dropped down to 136 and my numbers have been below 140 ever since. So yeah, part of that physical reaction I had could have been my microbiome, but I really do think it shows my carbs do need to stay very low. I do better with no more than about 20 grams of carbs per day. And that brings me to the other interesting fact that I discovered. See, I'd known for quite some time that when I eat more fat and less carbs, I don't eat as much food. And that meant not eating as much food, I probably wasn't getting as many calories. Well, now that I was writing everything down, I was able to calculate how many calories per day I had too. And that looks like this. Remember, this final day, I still have 1 meal remaining, so that last number will go up by the end of today. But there's the evidence. And I should note that these numbers are the maximum value, which is true for the grams of fat, carbs, and protein as well. I wrote down the values before I ate anything, and in most of the days, I didn't even finish all my food. So this is the upper limit of how many calories I could have consumed. The first day was 2,070. The day when I ate too many carbs, I had only 2,160 calories. Every other day, I was well below 2,000 calories per day. In fact, not counting today's numbers yet, the previous 6 days, I've averaged 1,875 calories per day. Meaning if I'm supposed to get 2,000 calories per day, I have a 125 calorie deficit each day without even trying. And that includes the day I ate too many carbs. To put all that into context, that means that over those 6 days, I ate 750 calories less than I was permitted to eat, given a 2,000 calorie per day maximum. So what can we conclude from all this? Well, first and most importantly, bear in mind that this is just a study of me. It's n equals 1. What is true for me may or may not be true for anyone else out there. Also, while I wrote down the values from the information labels, if you recall from a previous video I did, those numbers can be off by as much as 20% without the FDA cracking down on the food industry. So these numbers sadly do not have scientific precision. But in terms of a rough guide, I think it's very clear that 1, there is a strong correlation between me consuming too many carbs and my blood sugar spiking. That's obvious and expected, so the fact that it bears out helps me indicate the general notions here are probably sound. Second, what constitutes too many carbs Well, for me, that's actually a relatively small number of carbs. I used to eat more than 180 grams of carbs while eating a single snack of potato chips. Now, if I do that over the course of an entire day, it absolutely wrecks me. So I think it's very safe to conclude beyond all doubt that I have extreme sensitivity to carbohydrates right now. 3, high-fat, low-carb diets definitely result in me consuming fewer calories overall. So even if such a diet did not put me into ketosis, so that I was burning fat more efficiently, it still means that I'm put into a caloric restrictive state where I'm simply not eating as many calories over time. And what about the future? Well, I should be done with my antibiotics by the end of this week, and last night I was finally able to sleep through the night without needing a pain pill. So I'll continue taking these measurements and seeing what next week's numbers look like. That should let me know how much of an impact the antibiotics and pain medication I have been taking really has on my blood sugar levels. Also, hopefully I can get a new battery for my scale and then add my weight into this. Ironically, I think this time around I probably lost the most amount of weight when I ate the carbs because I spent so much time in the bathroom afterwards. Anyway, that's not healthy weight loss, and I'm curious to see what the normal routine is accomplishing. Final word, don't take anything that I've mentioned here as medical advice for you. Do your own research and talk with your own doctor and look at what works best for you. You are your own individual. Everybody is different. And just because something works for one person doesn't mean it will work for anybody else at all. And as always, have a wonderful day and peace out.